What is activism? Well, it depends on who you ask. Who do you ask? You can ask anyone. I'll go first. Activism, in my own words, is going out of your way in multiple instances to improve or help a cause. That being said, an activist is an individual who does just that, and anyone with a determination can be one. I learned in class, though, that an activist is someone who is trying to change the world in some way, someone who takes action in support of some political, social, or ethical issue. Now, I don't think my definition and Moriarty's definition are too far off from one another, but I want to compare it to some other people's definitions. So I asked my high school educated mom what she thinks an activist is. She said, and I quote, "An activist is someone who fights for what they believe is right." She pondered and then finished by saying, "Sometimes their view of what's right is construed in the eyes of the law." Then I decided to ask my sister, who is in college, what she thinks an activist is. She said, "Activists stand up for what they believe in and they don't back down." Now that I've got an idea of what an activist is, let's talk about whether or not I consider myself one. For starters, activists do one or two things. They participate in either direct or indirect action. Direct action would be something an activist does to make an immediate change. In the case of an environmental activist, such as Dave Foreman, direct action would look something like tree spiking or sitting in front of a bulldozer. Indirect action, on the other hand, is intended to influence people who have the power to create change, like writing a letter to a legislator in hopes of solving some issue. While neither form of action is right or wrong, or better or worse, I think activists who take direct action should be careful if they participate in more radical activities, as the law could get involved and one could be charged for civil disobedience. While I would love to be able to say that me recycling, using less paper, taking shorter showers, and driving as little as possible, among other things, all consider me an environmental activist, they don't. I take neither of the types of action that I mentioned previously. I have never talked to legislators about environmental issues, nor have I ever sat in front of a bulldozer or tree in hopes of preventing a tree from being cut down. I can recycle and take short showers all I want, but I won't be an activist until I do something more, or something with a bigger impact. It isn't that what I do to benefit the environment doesn't necessarily make a difference, but I'm not making a significant enough change myself to say I'm an activist. Activists are also committed to their duties as one, and they stay consistent, which is another reason I can't consider myself an activist. Even if I wrote one letter or sat in front of one tree, I still don't think I could consider myself one. Saying I'm an activist because I recycled a can would pain me to tell people because that would be an offense to all the real activists in the world. Although I don't think sacrifices must be made in order to consider oneself an activist, activists do work so much harder and do much more work than just recycling cans. That being said, I also don't think whether or not someone considers themselves an environmental activist makes them a good or ethical person either. There could be really terrible people who tree sit and kind, caring people who have never recycled a day in their life. It is also key to consider that not everyone who is an activist or participates in activist-like activities considers themselves one. Some people believe that being an activist is their moral responsibility as a member of the land. Others simply may do things that debatably make them an activist. For example, depending on who you ask, some people may say that Charlotte Gill, who planted trees in order to replenish the trees a logging company cut, is an environmental activist, while others may say that tree planting is not a form of activism. She gets paid for it, although very little, which is why some may say it does not count as activism. Personally, I don't think whether or not someone is paid to do activist work determines whether or not they're a true activist. If their intention is honest, then they are an activist. Despite what people consider an activist and what isn't considered activism, if everyone engaged in activism or considered themselves an activist, the term would lose its meaning. This is similar to the way that using the term nature can be frustrating, as some consider everything on this earth to be part of nature. If everyone is considered an activist, then we'd all be participating in it, and it wouldn't be something inspiring anymore. So, although activism isn't applicable to my own life, nor do I consider myself an activist, I still think I've done at least something to hinder the destruction of our environment. It's not like you're either an activist or you don't do anything to save the environment. There are levels of the ethical actions you take to do so.